So in today's video, I'm sharing 5 powerful steps to heal emotional triggers in relationships. So in this video, you're going to learn exactly how to identify and manage these emotional triggers so they don't hurt you in relationship. But if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. So what is a trigger? It's basically an intense emotional reaction to something in the moment that reminds you of something painful from your past. But we think it's all about what's happening in the moment because it's so painful. But the key to unlocking triggers is to be able to understand where they came from, and we're going to talk about that in this video. Emotional triggers happen much more frequently in our romantic relationships and with certain family members because those are the relationships that we tend to feel the most vulnerable in. So what are some examples of emotional triggers? One of them is any perceived judgment or criticism. Whether or not somebody actually said something critical doesn't matter. It's your perception of it that counts. Another one is feeling dismissed or disrespected in some way. Tone of voice is another big trigger. This one could be an aggressive tone of voice or a condescending tone of voice, making you feel less than. Another common emotional trigger is feeling abandoned or rejected in some way. And another one that I thought was really interesting is being interrupted. Often that can be a huge trigger because we don't feel heard, and it goes way back to childhood. So why is it so hard to manage these emotional triggers? Emotional triggers are usually tied to the past, to situations that haven't been healed or resolved in any way. So they tend to really create a lot of intense emotion. So for example, if you grew up in a dysfunctional family like I did, and your feelings or your experiences were not validated, those feelings get stuck. And the way we heal as adults and as children is through our feelings and being able to process what happens to us so that we can let it go and move on. But when that doesn't happen in childhood, we get stuck. So here's an example. Say you came home from school and you were bullied, and you told your parents and they completely supported you and validated you and said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that happened. We're absolutely going to get you help in this situation." So most likely that situation would not become an emotional trigger as an adult. But let's just rewind that and say that you weren't supported, and maybe you came home and told them and they actually blamed you, or maybe they said something like, "Toughen up, you're being too sensitive." Those type of reactions tend to create the trigger. So what happens is we get frozen in that fear because we don't get the support we need. So fast forward into adulthood, we have something similar happen where maybe somebody is teasing us or criticizing us and it feels similar to the bullying experience. We're probably going to have a really big reaction to that. Not only because we suffered from bullying, but we also got punished for how we reacted. Part of what happens when we get emotionally triggered is those original experiences growing up get in the way of us being able to stay calm in the moment. If you've ever had an emotional trigger, say me too in the comments. This video is going to help. So the first step in healing emotional triggers in relationships is you need to identify them fast. Usually when we're triggered, you probably notice that you get intensely upset really quickly. And often it may happen without warning. But here's the thing. If you can identify what those triggers are in the examples I gave you, that's going to give you a head start. Because when you know your triggers, you can make plans around them. And that's where these steps are going to help you. So here are 2 quick ways to identify triggers fast. One is any type of somatic or physical signs that you're experiencing in your body. For instance, rapid heart rate, sweating, muscle tension, especially in the upper back and shoulders. Your body is giving you signs that you're starting to react. And those can be really easy to pay attention to because they're pretty obvious. So the next way to identify a trigger is to trace your negative self-talk. This self-talk is most likely negative messages about yourself or the person triggering you. And these are really important because sometimes we have themes like, "Oh, here we go again. She's out to get me. I'm worthless. I can't do any better." Those messages are really important to identify. So between the physical body's reaction and what you're telling yourself, those are two easy ways to catch an emotional trigger. So the next step to heal an emotional trigger, I want you to pay attention to your body's reaction. And what I want you to do is I want you to pair that with another tool, which is rate your stress level. So from 1 to 10, how intense is that emotion? When you're triggered, most likely you're gonna not be able to catch it until it's a 7, 8, 9. But when you know your early warning sign, that's gonna give you a heads up. So as you are starting to pay attention to your body, maybe your heart's starting to race really fast, I want you to catch that feeling before it gets too intense. If you're at a 3 or a 4, you're upset, but you're still in control. Once it goes over a 5, that's when we start to say and do things that are hurtful, and we increasingly lose control as our stress level increases. Now, when your number becomes a 5 or greater, that's when you need to do step 3, which is you have to remove yourself. When you're feeling triggered, it is the worst time to stay and try to advocate for yourself. Because what's happening in your body is you're most likely having that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction. So what you want to do is you want to leave. Leave the room, leave the house, tell the person you can't talk and hang up the phone. Don't stay, because when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction, we are not going to be able to listen properly or control our reactions, because our body wants to flee. All those stress hormones are going to work against you being able to stay calm, and I don't want that for you. So the next step for how to heal the emotional trigger is I want you to practice some form of self-soothing. So after you excuse yourself and leave, the whole goal is to calm the body's reaction to stress. And once that fight or flight reaction happens in your body, you're actually going to need 20 minutes to calm your body's reaction to stress. Taking a 5-minute timeout is not going to be enough time. This is something I talk extensively about in my Calming Anger class, because most people leave the room for 5 minutes and then come back with a really good zinger, and it doesn't go well because you're not calm enough to have the conversation. So some ways to calm the body is taking a brisk walk. This is a great way to get your energy out. Do some deep breathing. A lot of times when people are upset, they immediately start to hold their breath. So taking some deep belly breaths can really help. Another great tool is tapping. This is a series of taps you do on your upper body as you talk through your stress. Tapping is an amazing way to calm the body's reaction to stress in minutes. So I'll link that video in the comments too. So the last step for how to heal emotional triggers, you need to connect the trigger to the original source. I talk a lot about this in my emotional triggers journal, where I want you to do some writing about what the present situation or hurt is connected to. And the easiest way to do that is through journaling. I love writing because it always gets me in touch with what I'm really upset about versus what I think I'm upset about. So one way to do that is to ask yourself, what does this current situation remind you of? Where have you felt this way before? Because if you think about it, you will probably be able to trace it back to its original source. So for instance, if you're sensitive to your partner's criticism and you tend to feel criticized a lot, I want you to trace that back to when you might have felt criticized in your childhood or in your young adulthood, because there's gonna be a link. And when you find that link, it's gonna help heal that trigger. Because when I can find the original source, it actually helps increase my awareness, and it helps me change my point of view about the current situation. So for instance, years ago, I dated somebody who was chronically late, and I felt like his being late meant that he didn't care about me. Until one day, because I do this work, I realized, wait a minute, being late has nothing to do with how much he cared about me. But that's what we do with triggers, is we assign meaning to them that isn't there because it mimics an old hurt. And I was left a lot as a kid. So once I made that connection, I could look at my boyfriend at the time and go, you know what? He's not doing anything purposely to hurt me. Where my hurt came was feeling like I was abandoned a lot as a kid. And so when people are late, it would trigger that same feeling. So when you can connect the present situation to its original source, and again, writing is the easiest way to do that, that's going to help free up that trigger and make that emotional reaction much more manageable. So the next thing I want you to do is I want you to go watch my video on anger issues, because often when we're triggered, anger is the next thing we need to deal with. Thanks so much.